What I'd like to talk about today is development. And I think this is probably going to be two parts as it's kind of long. Piaget, Freud, Erikson, and Kohlberg and his stages of moral development. Piaget. Piaget was a cognitive psychologist, and one of the things that he's known for is he was watching children play. I don't know how long it was that he watched children play, but the idea in his mind was that the more complex the brain is, the more, how do you know? How do you know that the brain is developing? Because their play becomes more complex. So Piaget came up with 4 stages of, mental development: sensory motor, pre-operational, concrete operations, and formal operations. One of the things that strikes you about this particular theory is that for the first 2 years, from birth to approximately 2 years of age, Piaget, who's a cognitive psychologist, says, you don't think. You don't really think at all. That's odd. I think it's going to sound funny when I say it this way, but if you have access, if you've seen small children for any length of time, it seems to me clear that they are in fact thinking. But to Piaget, no, there was no thinking. You were getting used to your body. That is, you were learning your muscles and how to move around. This would include toilet training and crawling and moving your mouth and starting to be able to form sounds. So that's sensory motor. Pre-operational is the child's world revolves around the child. One of my favorite quotes from one of the books that we used to have was, they asked the little boy, do you have a brother? Yeah. Does your brother have a brother? No. Right? Because I am not his brother, he's my brother. Right? So everything revolves around me and my and I want. And it's not egotistical. It's what they call egocentric. If you had a young person who it was an AP question. This little girl goes on a tour of a firehouse in her sort of like city or neighborhood. How would she describe it? Well, remember, pre-operational, we went to go see my firehouse, or it was my neighborhood firehouse. So that this thing basically belongs to me. And the firemen didn't demonstrate, they showed me. Right? So everything is about me. Concrete operations is kind of what it sounds like. If you can see it, you can touch it, you can count it, you can think about it. At this point in time, a child begins to understand conservation. Conservation. You have 2 beakers of water. They are the same size, the same everything. The water level in the 2 beakers is the same. And you ask a child, which one has more, right? I can't, my hands even. And they'll say, same, they're same. Right in front of the child, you have a graduated cylinder, which is the tall, skinny. You pour your beaker into the graduated cylinder, right? So it's tall and skinny. Now you have the graduated cylinder and you have your original beaker. And you say, which one has more? Initially in concrete operations, they'll say the graduated cylinder because it's taller. This is where shape sometimes equals, volume. If something is taller, then it must be more. If something is much wider, then it must be more. So you'll have maybe siblings fighting over food portions. Because one of the younger children will think that the other child has more. Formal operations is basically adult thinking. You can think in abstract. Now let's talk about Sigmund Freud. Freud was a very unusual fellow. So, oral, anal, phallic, latency, and genital, in that order. Oral, as much as people, and as much as Freud got wrong, if you have small children or you know of small children, you know that the very first thing that they do when they pick something up is they put it in their mouth. It could be the cat, right? Or the dog, arr, right? Goes in their mouth. Whether they're biting on it or not, is besides the point, but it goes into their mouth. Freud believed that this was basically, if you think about maybe someone who's blind or deaf, they have to access the world in a different way. And so Freud said the very first way that you experience your world is the lips and the tongue and the mouth. And if you think about eating, anyway, that's kind of where Freud came from. So Freud said you could either have a positive outcome and go on to the next stage, or you could have a negative outcome and you could get stuck in a stage. And I believe it's the first three. He said most people, most of the time, get stuck in one of the first three stages. So what happens if you get stuck in the oral stage is people who overeat. And I don't mean who gorge themselves, not gluttons, but someone who always has to have a cigarette, hanging out of their mouth, or they have to have a piece of candy in their mouth. Someone who always has to be, maybe they have a toothpick that they're constantly chewing on. Something, has to be in their mouth to occupy them. It's kind of a self-soothing, if you will. So the next stage is anal. This would be about toilet training age, say, I think oral is 0 to 2, so this would be like 2 to like 3.5 or 4. Freud said that control of your body or controlling your body can really make you self-conscious. So parents who don't want to change diapers anymore may be telling the child, oh my gosh, you had another accident, I don't understand why you're doing this, why can't you just go to the bathroom, like a big boy or like a big girl, or whatever the statement is. And this may cause stress and conflict in the young person, and they think, oh my gosh, why can't I do this? And they get really upset about not being able to perform the way that the parent wants. So a positive outcome, obviously, for the anal stage is you go on to the next stage. A negative, I think about it in two different ways. One is because you're so afraid of going, as a young person, going to the bathroom at the wrong time, or, that you clench up. I am not going to go. I'm not going to go. I am not going to let that fecal matter out of my body. And you get people who are hoarders, right? They hang on to everything. They have a hard time letting relationships go. They have a hard time letting things, material things go, and they just turn into big collectors. Now, the other way I conceptualize this as well, though, is that you could come out bad on the other way, is instead of holding everything in, you just let it all out. You just purge, and you don't really care that you're not doing what your parents want. And I think those people are the kind of people who go from job to job, from relationship to relationship, as kind of another bad outcome to the anal stage. Phallic. During this particular period of time, both male and female, or although Freud focused mostly on the male, and I think there's a reason behind that, but I won't go into that now. That young people find out that there's another part of their body that's particularly sensitive, shall we say, and that they experiment, at least for some period of time, with their genitals. What happens then is a positive outcome is they just accept that part of the body. They understand that it can be used for things, and they go on. But a negative would be someone who gets stuck. I don't know quite how to say this. They are sexualized, but only with themselves. This is not the kind of person who would seek out a consensual sexual relationship. They would stick mostly with themselves and do sexual things with themselves at home. And that would be a negative outcome for that particular stage. So then comes the point about children going to school. And the idea is, how is it that children aren't very sexualized at a very young age if sex is such a big thing? And Freud basically said young children, with their parents pushing them, come to understand that learning is very important, and they push away and kind of convert that sexual energy into learning. And so they spend time learning and not, this is latency, I'm so sorry if I didn't say that, and not focusing on sexual activity. So someone who gets stuck in latency would be someone who really never seeks out a relationship of any particular kind. Now, not that they're asocial, that they don't want it to be. They would still have friends. They would still be able to go to work, and interact with other people. They just wouldn't be sexual about it. So you might find, say, a person who's never been married. They've had a long, productive life. They've done a lot of things that they wanted, but a relationship and children were just never something that they were interested in. The last one, of course, let's see. Right, so that was a bad outcome for latency. I'm so sorry. Genital is the end. You've now come to the finish line, so to speak, of your psychosexual development. You now will go out and have a normal, quote unquote, because Freud, right? A normal sexual relationship with a partner and build a family and a professional life of some kind.